Today's show is going to be a little different. Last week, I had an interview with the Northwest Jeepcast, and I decided to share that interview with you today. Stick around for lots of laughs and find out why I'm not really a fan of the term overlanding, why Canada is better than anything American, why we put the loon on our money, and why I think the Whipsaw is the most overrated trail in BC.
This is the Northwest Jeepcast, where we talk about Jeeps. You want to hear about your rig from the beast to the least. We're talking about your Jeep, and we got the scoop on the trail systems of the Pacific Northwest and more. Now, are you ready to...
Hey, Gary.
Hey, Wes, and welcome to episode 464, an interview with 4x4 Canada podcast. This is your host, Gary Henderson, and I have special guest, Wes Kibble. Wes, how you doing?
Hey, Gary, I'm doing great tonight. I have to say that really happy to be here and to bring the people of the Americas the 4x4 Canada podcast, the best 4x4 related podcast in Canada.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you all for joining us on this fantastic voyage here at Funny Moon Studios. We are the podcast guys living the Jeep life. That's right, folks. We are building them, wheeling them, fixing them, racing them, and sharing it with you. So thank you for telling your friends about this show. You know, Wes, I'm gonna rib you right off the beginning, because saying that you're targeting the Canada market and that's just not saying a whole lot. all of the Canadian listeners, they're going to take a little bit of a dig. Come on, man. What do you guys have up there? 30 people maybe at the most, right?
We've got the best wheel in North America. That's all I can say.
A few episodes ago, we were having a debate with whether East Coast or West Coast wheeling was the best. And now you're going to try to claim to have the best North American wheeling?
Oh, dude, I tell you, Canada is so broad. You got BC, which has got the mountains and the oceans. I mean, we're talking Colorado and California mixed, right? We got grasslands. We got everything like that. That's why BC has like the most YouTubers around, because
is
of the
that
great,
right?
And then you go out into the middle, you got the prairies, which I kind of admit are kind of boring. But then you head out into the east, man. And it's just so beautiful. Great wheeling on the rocks out there. You can't beat wheeling in Canada.
But everything you just described is all here in America too.
Yeah, but this is Canada.
I don't know. I've been hearing rumors that Canada might not even exist. Can you even scientifically prove that Canada is really there?
It is a thing stopping Alaska from actually becoming part of the States.
I can take it, the part of the contiguous United States is the thing. Okay, now that I will believe. That Canada's role is just to keep Alaska from joining with the United States physically. Now you've got me. Now I'm on board. Well, it's really cool. I'm glad that you reached out. We've been having a bunch of interviews recently, and we love doing shows, with other podcasters too, because well, first of all, they always have really great equipment. And so audio quality with other podcasters always ends up really good. And sometimes you can't say the same when you're, interviewing somebody in the industry or something like that, because they just don't have the podcast equipment. But so your mics sound great. And so that's a good start to the show, Wes.
At least people can hear me and understand me a little bit, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, why don't you start? So obviously we've introduced you already as being the host at the 4x4 Canada podcast. Why don't you start with a little bit of an introduction of yourself, though? What do you do? How long have you been into wheeling, the off-road experience? Do you rock crawl? Do you overland? Do you do it all? Do you race? Give us some background on yourself first.
You bet. I basically grew up in the four-wheel drive world. My parents actually met on a 4x4 run.
Wow.
And so they, my dad went from Kamloops here up to an event up in Quesnel, and ended up meeting my mom. And there, I came along a year later or 2 years later. And so I grew up in a 4x4 family. My parents raced. They did four-wheel drive trips and that. And my big goal when I was growing up is I wanted to be a parts person, and I wanted to own a 4-wheel drive shop or work in a 4-wheel drive shop.
Wow.
And so right out of school, I got a great opportunity to work at a local 4-wheel drive shop. And I worked at 4-wheel drive shops for another 20 years, everything from in Kamloops, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and then came back. And I did a lot of wheeling. I did some off-road racing. We actually have desert racing up here.
Wow,
I don't know.
what?
Yeah,
There's no desert
people don't,
there.
People
Come
don't
on.
believe that, right?
No.
But we actually had some really good desert races up here. And
your desert is under like 3 feet of ice, though, right? Is that how I understand it?
Our race vehicles have parkas, or have a heater system and that. But there's actually a race up in Quesnel, a couple hours, about 5 hours north of me, and they have a race in wintertime in February. And it's like Ultra 4s, and they also have a beater with a heater class and that. But these guys are running, the Ultra 4s with heaters, and they're all bundled up in snowsuits and
oh my gosh,
and all that. So it's a real Canadian event for sure. But yeah, no, my background is I've been all kind of wheeling, and I've had everything from Willys to a bunch of Broncos and TJ and Grand Cherokees and different vehicles. And now I'm more into I hate the term overlanding. I'm into the truck camping. I'm into the 4-wheeling and camping. And
that sounds like overlanding. Why don't you like the term overlanding?
Maybe because everybody else uses it. I don't know.
Everybody else has made it a dirty word.
They have. I mean, it's been great for the industry.
Yeah.
It's been a huge game changer for the 4x4 or the exploring community for sure. But it's I just go out and wheel, and I go out and camp, and sometimes they mix. Right. So
I mean, it's funny that you say it that way, because I mean, like, when Gary and I started with our rigs, we started with the mindset of build it to carry a bunch of equipment, gear, because we did want to go camping, right? Like, we wanted to take it and do backwoods camping where or we call it dispersed camping, right? There's no campsite, right? But you can camp within 30 feet off of a trail or something like that. Like, they give you this boundary that you can camp at. So we went and found, places, out in the middle of nowhere that you could camp at. And I don't know, I mean, maybe the term was around back then, but it certainly wasn't as popular as it is now. But I mean, like basically, like we were overlanding before it was called overlanding, right?
Exactly. And that's sort of my point, right? I mean, I grew up doing it. And, I could be 5 years old or 10 years old. I'd be making these trips that are 3-4 days long with my family, and we're hitting, alpine mountaintops and, all that stuff. And it's what people call overlanding today. We were doing it back in the 70s or the 80s.
Right.
So.
No, I mean, whoever created the overlanding term, I mean, like, they probably did it with a mindset of, like, hey, we need to give this genre of equipment a name, so that way, it's gonna make like, by having a name, it's gonna make it more popular, right? Nobody's gonna get excited about a car camping piece of equipment, right? Like
exactly.
that's been around forever, right? Like, but we need to give it a new name, a fresh new name, so that way, it's gonna be associated with lattes and DSLRs, right? Like, so.
But it has been a huge boost to the industry, right? And it gets people out. That's the thing. I mean, even if it gets them to the mall, with their
I'm not knocking it. It's just, it's fun. I'm just analyzing, I guess, what actually happened, right? I mean, like, it is car camping, but, and car camping didn't change, but somehow giving it this name made it, infused it with so much money, and, and I don't know, maybe there's got to be something psychological in here. I wish I was more of an expert, but I bet it has something to do with, like, all of us grew up car camping, a lot of us, and these same people that are overlanding today probably grew up car camping, but they couldn't get themselves around to, like, oh, I'm not going to spend, all kinds of money on the thing that I did when I was a kid called car camping. Like, I got to infuse this with, like, the highest technology stuff and thousands of dollars, in order for it to really draw, my interest.
Social media has had a huge play in this.
Oh, I bet.
Right?
I bet that's right.
Speaking of, I as much as I make fun of overlanding and that, it is a big part of my life, and especially with my guests and that.
Yeah.
But I just find it so funny how some people get so irate, not irate, but they just, like, this is overlanding. That's not overlanding. And you have to be doing this. And it's like, dude, calm down. Like, it is what you want it to be.
Yeah,
and that's everything.
yeah.
There's different people have different thoughts and views on overlanding. And if this is what you want to call overlanding, so be it. Right. So speaking a little bit off topic or on topic, but off topic, have you ever heard of a YouTube channel called Overlanding Overland?
No, I haven't, but that's not to say that it's not important or that they don't do a lot of stuff, because I'm just not much of a YouTube watcher, right? Like I just don't.
You got to check him out. Yeah. Colin is a guy from Vancouver Island, but his whole channel premise is of mocking overlanders.
Is that right?
But he's actually an overlander. He's got a wickedly built Land Cruiser, and it's just a mean machine, right?
Yeah.
But he's constantly mocking overlanding while he's opening up his fridge and stuff like that, right? Like he's a hilarious. You got to check him out. Overlanding Overland. Colin's a great guy out of Vancouver Island.
It sounds funny. I mean, even the name of the name of the show, right, or the name of the channel, right, is it has all of it in there, right? Because it's obviously redundant, but the redundancy is what makes it, it lets you know that he's onto it, right? Like,
and he's got a voice that is comical. Just hearing his voice makes you laugh. So when he's doing all these other things, and I'm sorry, Colin, if that's your real voice, I don't mean to make fun of it, but it adds to the show.
That's hilarious, man. No, and okay, so right now, so you're kind of more in the take your rig out and go camping and stuff like that. What kind of vehicle do you have?
I'm gonna hang my head right now because I am running the Tacoma right now.
I like Tacomas.
Well, basically what it boiled down to. I wanted to get back into a TJ. I love my TJ.
Yeah.
I miss it, but I needed something a little bigger, and so I hopped into an Xterra, and then I needed something different when the Xterra went on its last legs. But the thing with the Tacoma is that I needed something that I could haul my kayaks with. So whether I have a rooftop tent and kayaks or whatever, the kayaks, to be honest with you, were the biggest priority for me. And I'd love to get back into a TJ, but rooftop tents and kayaks don't really work.
No, so. you can't fit a tent and a kayak on a TJ. I don't know how that would work unless it's like a inflatable kayak, maybe. Which I've looked at that because I mean, like, it's pretty rare, but like sometimes we will wheel to a location with a lake, and I just look at it going like, man, I just love to be in that water so bad. And of course, in Canada, I gotta imagine like the lakes are limitless, right? I mean, there's just water everywhere.
Dude, yeah, there's so many lakes. I mean, I've got a lake quite often. I'll go up to for dinner. It's like 10 minutes from my house. Within an hour, I've probably got 30 really good fly fishing lakes around me, right? So
and that's what I was going to ask you too. Your draw to the lake, is that out of sport fishing or other activities, or what do you like doing out on the lake?
Serenity.
That's a good one too.
Sometimes I'll just be out in the middle of the lake and I'll just stop paddling and just close my eyes and listen to the loons. The loons, just for you Americans, are like a duck, but they're like really, really cool.
But they're
cool enough that we actually put them on a coin that we call the loonie.
The loonie, yeah.
Yeah,
you have a loonie and a toonie, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the looney's $1. See, that's how cool the loons are.
Right.
We actually put them on our money. Some guys take the presidents and put them on. We put on loons and other animals because
I think
they're actually probably smarter than a lot of our politicians.
I would believe that too. But here's an analogy for you, because I think what you're saying is that loons are to American ducks as overlanding is to car camping.
There you go.
It's all in the marketing. Somebody up there said, hey, we got to market these loons. Let's put them on a penny. Or no, I guess it's $1. Sorry. Let's put them on $1 and that'll make them special.
Yeah.
Well, look, since we're talking about birds, can you do something about keeping your Canadian geese up there? Why are they always down here, man? Come on.
We keep on trying to send them down there, right? Because you're mocking Canada earlier and saying what importance is Canada,
right?
Dude,
yeah.
If Canada disappeared, you would have all the Canadian geese.
Okay, I can't handle that, but I think I don't know. I think we are handling it. I don't ever think they go back. They're protected because they're a migratory bird, but I don't think they migrate anymore. Like they are just here all the time, year round.
We call them ninja thunder chickens.
That's a great name. No, and
have you ever pissed one off?
No, they're crazy, man.
Oh, they're psycho. They're more psycho than my ex, right? Like they're nuts. Don't piss them off at all.
Yes, no kidding. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I never thought we were going to get into loons and geese on this talk, but I'm so glad that we did, because we're solving, hard thought problems right now. We're definitely getting to the root of it. All right. So you've been wheeling, it sounds like, since you were born. I mean, oh my gosh, you've just been in the scene like right from the very beginning. Well, give us some of the history. So I get that you had a TJ, you had an Xterra, you now have a Tacoma. Give us some of the other history of your vehicles.
My first vehicle was a Bronco. It was a '66 Bronco, which I bought cheap and drove it for a while. And when I was going to high school, my dad, actually before I went to high school, when I was a kid, my dad raced a Willys CJ2A with a Capri V6 in it. And so that's kind of where my love of the Willys started. But when I was in high school, we found another Willys and we built that up and put a small block in it and ran some mud races and that. And I actually just recently found that exact Jeep up for sale.
What?
Yeah.
The same.
So the exact same Jeep. All it is the body and the cage, which I totally recognize. The guy wants a lot of money for it, I'm like, for a body and a cage, it would be, you'd have to start right from scratch, right? You have to find another frame. You got to do a running gear, etc. But I'm like, that is something I spent years in the garage with my dad.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really, really tempting to get back.
Don't tell him how important it is to you. He'll raise the price.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, especially since my dad passed 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. Oh my god!
It becomes that much more.
You gotta get it, man. Start a GoFundMe or something to get the coin.
No doubt. Well, I was thinking, because I don't exactly have the room for it either. But I'm like, I was out at my mom's place and I was looking at her backyard, and I'm like, she's got a lot of acres. I could put a lot of Jeeps in here, right? So.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so you have Jeeps in your history. You got other 4x4s. And okay, so now in terms of your history, you've worked at 4x4 shops.
Yep.
What other related things have you done?
Worked in 4x4 shops was a big thing. Like I say, was involved in racing both in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario.
That's cool.
There's actually a really good series that's been around for years in Ontario called the Ontario Off-Road Racing Association. And it's short course wheel to wheel, and I was quite involved with that for about 10 years until I moved back to BC. And but yeah, a lot of racing. I've been out of the racing scene for a bit, but the one thing about the podcast is I'm talking to a lot of these racers, whether it be mud racers or wheel to wheel or desert racers. I was talking, Steve McCross, he used to be a short course racer in Ontario, and he went and did the NORA race in his Bronco and that. So that has, reintroduced me back to the racing.
That's really cool. So let's get onto the podcast now. So 4x4 Canada podcast. Sounds like you did a little bit of research and found out that there's no other 4x4 based, off-roading podcast in Canada. So that's pretty cool to be the one.
That's why I can say that it is the most popular 4x4 podcast in Canada.
That's right. There is no second. That's awesome. And so I mean, I'm picking up, correct me if I'm not getting this right, but I mean, I'm picking up that, you started this because you felt like, you had something to share. You have, 40 years of plus of experience in the community. You've been involved in a lot of things, from building and racing, and a ton of people. So you wanted to, find a way to get that information out to people. Is that basically the gist of it? Is there more to it?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I listen to a lot of the podcasts, like yourselves.
Oh, and, thank you.
I listen to quite a few different genres of podcasts as well. But originally I was, a friend of my dad's passed away last summer, and I've been talking to him, and I convert some of the old videos like VHS or 8mm videos into digital. And he had a bunch that he wanted me to convert and into digital. And then all of a sudden he passed away. And I was thinking, man, I need to save some of these, some of our elder stories. These guys were wheeling back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And they're starting to drop off. And we need to keep some of that history alive. So I was like, how can I do that? And I thought about doing a YouTube channel, but I also wanted to travel to Ontario and talk to those guys. And I thought, well, how about a podcast? And I thought, okay, if I do a podcast, I can also include other people, like say some of the YouTube people, to help promote the YouTube industry in Canada. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a huge amount of YouTube channels in BC, as well as, Alberta's on the rise and Ontario as well. And then it's like, okay, what about the racing? Every racer has a story. They're always talking, they're always bench racing, right? So I thought, okay, we can do this, incorporate that. And then my last thought that, got it going is there's a lot of Canadian companies that even Canadians don't know about.
Interesting.
Right. So how can we promote these Canadian companies, whether they're a manufacturer, whether they're a reseller? How can we promote these Canadian companies to, get more exposure? Because a lot of people don't realize that we have a lot of really good Canadian manufacturers here.
Huh. All right.
So that's what started it. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And did a little bit of research, and then I started. Because I figured if I'm not going to just go ahead and do it, I won't do it. If I keep on researching it, you'll never do it. So
no, that's the truth. I mean, occasionally I'll go and I'll search, for what other Jeep podcasts are out there, and the landscape has changed a ton since we started, right? I mean, when we started, there was just a few Jeep and off-road podcasts, and it was kind of easy to kind of figure out, well, like, how could we differentiate ourselves? Now I don't know how, right? Like it would be daunting to try to figure out, who all's out there and like, what are they doing and how to be different. And I don't know, maybe that's not the point anymore, right? Like maybe being different is how to separate yourself isn't the point. Like I think a lot of people, it sounds like yourself, like just have a thing to say, right? And like, you have an idea of a style of talking, and interviewing other people. And I love this direction that you have, which is to, try to capture some of the stories that we're about to lose, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, that generation didn't have, media, podcasting or video to sit down and tell their stories. I mean, they told their stories to their kids. They told their stories, around campfires. So few of them get recorded, right, to be retold. So that's really cool that you're focusing on that and getting some of those documented, because you're right, like they're just not going to be around for very much longer.
Well, even myself, I'm 51 years old, and I can't remember what I did last week. Never mind what I did 30 years ago, right? So it's
No, I'm with you. The stuff stuff I thought that should still be in recollection, it's way gone. But I don't know, like in my working career before I was done, I was in software, and I was in at a time when like the internet was just starting, from a public perspective, right? Like obviously, DARPANet and several other things had been around for many, many years before I got into it, but I kind of got into it, when, it finally got commercialized or consumerized. And there was a lot of neat things that happened at that time, right? So I do have a lot of stories about, technology and working with, Microsoft and Netscape and a bunch of really cool things that happened, way early. So it was fun. But that's for a different podcast. See, I need somebody to come and start interviewing me about my old technology stories. Those are the ones that are almost lost.
A lot of people don't realize that, being a parts person and, working in the 4x4 shops for years, that we actually had these things called paper catalogs.
Yes, I know.
And manufacturers would put them out, whether it be Dick CPEC or whether it be, Wagner brake products. Right. They had paper catalogs instead of looking them up online. And technology has totally changed the industry, some for the better, some for the worse, right?
Right.
So,
well, my partner, Gary, he's, maybe not quite a decade ahead of me in the technology space. So he has even better stories about, the beginnings of like TCP/IP, right? Like your protocols that make the internet possible, right? So like he's even at the forefront of some of that stuff, has some great stories with, the pioneers, because he was just involved in that. So yeah, it's cool. I like that you're digging into that, because I think there's a lot of genres of information where, we got to start capturing these stories.
Yep.
All right. So you got the podcast, you're about a year in. When did you start yours?
I started last July, and yeah, about a year in, and it's been one hell of a ride, I tell you.
Yeah.
I don't really. I want to go back and listen to my first episode but I know that I've improved a lot since then. And I think was one of my smarter things I did is I got one of my best friends to come on because to him and I would just be talking, right? So there's no pressure and it's more comfortable in that. But yeah, I think it's been one heck of a ride and learning lots and learning people and meeting all these different people that, I wouldn't have the opportunity to maybe to sit down and talk with, right? So it's been interesting.
Now, what kind of path have you taken with your podcast equipment? Now, I know, a lot of our audience is going to care about podcast equipment, but there's an important analogy here, right? Because I relate these two things. Building up your podcast studio is the same thing as building up your Jeep. And you have several ways of going about it, right? Like a lot of people will build up their Jeep, step at a time, right? Like they'll do one thing, then they'll do the next thing, then they'll do the next thing. And then they'll realize, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that one thing. Now I got to take that off and then I got to go do something different. Right. And so like they kind of like iterate on their build and they keep doing it. And then sometimes, they wasted money because they bought something that now they're taking off. And then the other way, my podcast partner, Gary, was kind of more, maybe a little bit more like that, right? Like not unsure exactly where he wanted to go with it and kind of just kept, taking phases. And now granted, I'm not saying I didn't waste money along the way or buy things that I would end up taking off, but I at least started with like, hey, I know where I want to go. And like my first build, lasted about 10 years, right? So like I knew from the beginning, like I want, a 4-inch lift and I want to get onto 37s, on my JKU. And, so, we did migrate our builds, from, an overland style, carry everything to jettison all that weight because being lighter is so much better for rock crawling, right? Like we didn't even know, I think when we started, we had no idea the rock crawling that existed. And then, we found it out there. We found it while we were camping. We're like, oh my God, there's these awesome rock obstacles. Look at these things. Look at these machines going up these rocks. This is insane. And then, we just got drawn to that. Right. And then we built our rigs more in the rock crawling direction. So certainly, I'm not saying I was perfect at, buy once, cry once, but I started off with a direction of, I knew that I wanted to be on 37s. And I think that saved me a lot in the podcast space. So you'd think I'd be smart and, have known, hey, let's figure out where we want to go and just buy once. But on my side, I'll tell you my story first as a ways of introducing yours. We took multiple steps, right? I mean, like, we were unsure, did we even want to be doing this? And so, we started with like PC headphones, right? Like not like telecom style headphones, right? Which just sounded terrible. And we laid down some episodes that way, and then we're like, okay, well, let's get some real microphones. We got some USB mics, but it was condenser mics, not dynamic. And so again, like we just didn't know and bought condenser mics, which they're just, so for folks who don't know, they're just super hot, right? Like they pick up all kinds of noise. And
it's what a lot of people use for bands and stuff like that.
Yeah, because it'll pick up, right. It'll pick up everything for you, right?
Yeah.
Like you put it in the middle of the room, it picks up all the sound. But when you're talking, especially with a couple of hosts, you want your microphone close to your mouth and you want to just pick up only your voice and not other background noise. So a dynamic mic is much better for that. So we took a multi-phase, we were recording to the PC at a time. We were, then we got some equipment to record, to hardware. And so, we took a many phased approach to kind of get where we're at. And now, it's pretty cool, right? I mean, like, we grew it, we stayed excited about it. We've been doing an episode or more a week we just finished our 7th year. We're going on to year 8. And I just can't believe it. Right. And, now we've had, we got a full studio with, 4 mics in it and, switchboard and all this other stuff. So like, it's a really cool progression. Like, I wish we wouldn't have had to, have poor audio up front with cheap mics and then, have to buy and sell again, condenser mics. So, but I don't know. So that's our path with equipment. Tell me about yours.
Something I've always said about Jeeps or any 4x4 vehicle is two things. The best modification you can do is a full tank of gas. Just get out there and do it, right?
Yeah, that's
And
step
then-
one. Sure.
And then I also believe that everybody should drive their 4x4 stock for 6 months and wheel it stock for 6 months. Learn the vehicle, learn
Yeah.
what your capabilities are, what your vehicle's capabilities are. And so I kind of took that same thought process with the podcast. I did my research, and I knew that I would like to get, to the point where you guys are one day, where I have a separate, studio room and that. But I thought, okay, I'm going to start with, a good mic, a good dynamic mic, a Shure mic. And I am slowly building up my arsenal to do, more. But because it's not cheap, right? It's just the same thing as,
right.
jeeping.
Just like jeeping,
it all
right.
adds up, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's, I wasn't like you. I wasn't 100% sure, how well this was going to go and how much I'm actually going to like it. And then it turns out I actually love it.
Great.
And so I'm just investing more time and more money into it. But so it's a gradual build, but I know where I want. So all the equipment and I do the same thing with my vehicles. All the equipment I buy is the good stuff. I don't spend the money on the cheap stuff to buy it 4 times. So I'll go with say Bilstein's shocks instead of, Gabriel adjustable ease or whatever, right?
Right. Well, getting a Shure mic is a good mic, right? Like that's not a cheap mic. So
and then
you're
that can
making
build
good
up from there, right? Get some
Right.
more mics and get a pod with the pod 4 or different equipment. So what I do want to do is, I want to do it properly and go from there. But it is definitely a thing where I'm, trying to spread my money between wheel and podcasting as well too. So
yeah, no kidding. No, yeah, you're right. There's where to spend the resources, because you could go totally crazy on podcasting. I mean, like the equipment. There's a ton of equipment. You can go. You can go from audio to video to multicam video to, like building a dedicated studio for it. Those are all like, big sinks of cash.
Yeah, but I also don't want to do that until I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing with wheeling. You see a lot of people who go out and they'll put 37s on a JKU immediately, but they've actually never been off road. So, I'd rather learn how to do things and progress and with my equipment at the same speed that I'm progressing in my skills.
Yeah. No, yeah, those are all great examples, and I love how you just like I did, right? Like correlate, you're learning from building rigs to building your podcast game.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely made my mistakes with rigs too. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, here. All right, so you're about a year in. Tell us about the and obviously you mentioned that you started with a mindset of doing these interviews with, collecting these older stories. How has that been going? Has that stayed the focus? Have you brought in other Canadian, let's say, vendors and, other wheelers and such to kind of get their stories?
Yeah, it's worked out really well. I mean, I've got a list of people I got an Evernote thing, and I got a list of people. I just keep on adding to it, and I'll pick random people to shoot off an email or a phone call or whatever. And for the most part, everybody's been super excited about it. And it's been, everybody that's come on has enjoyed it, I think. And and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mix it up between, say, an overlanding YouTube guy, and the next time I'll do a racer, and then next time I'll do a company. And then, so there's companies that have, in Canada that have, rooftop tents, or they make their own rooftop tents. There's actually a company that has a made in Canada rooftop tent now.
Wow.
And then there's also, a lot of other really interesting companies. Tim from TMR Racing, he was on, which is a huge into the rock stuff, right? And he was, I think, my 8th episode in. He was gung ho with it, right? So it's continued on, and I try and spread it out a little bit, between the racing and so it's not just like 4 episodes of overlanding and then 4 episodes of racing and that, but it's everybody's been really receptive, and we've got a really, really good list of people coming up as well too. It's actually mind blowing.
That's really cool. Have you stayed focused exclusively on like interviews, or are you going to do things like, hey, this is the best bumper you should buy, or these are the spring choices that you have, or have you gone into like talking about products, or is it always going to just be interviews?
I've done a couple episodes on my own, solo episodes when I was in between interviews. So, and I'll probably never do that again, to be honest with you. It is so hard to do I find it very hard to do a solo episode.
It is,
myself, just, I don't know. I find an interview to me is a lot more interesting for myself as well as I think the listener.
Sure. I mean, I just think conversation, I mean, this is why, Gary and I have been, good partners with each other, because, we do have, good conversations, and, we spent a bunch of time, learning our Jeeps and learning terrains and learning a bunch of stuff that we felt like, hey, we want to share all this back, right? Like give back to the community and share it. And, it's been well received, and we've been really lucky with it. So it's been fun, but you're right. I don't know that it would have turned out the same if it had just been, one of us, and not both of us. So
I find like we're working towards doing a round table as well. Like take some of the YouTube Overlander guys and get some of them together, and we can talk about say the top 5 overland gear or something. Like doing some overlanding or some different round tables.
Right.
One of the other things too that I haven't really mentioned anywhere yet is that I have a new guest host coming on soon. Trisha from Toronto is going to be coming on board. So it's going to be interesting. I've talked about it with some of my friends, and they're like, yes, somebody else other than you talking.
Those friends are keepers right there.
Exactly, right. But it's a whole nother perspective, right? It's a female perspective, and it's, she's been wheeling for a few years, but she was actually a guest on the show, and we had her on as the GTA Jeep Girls, as a Jeep only female club in the general Toronto area. And then she, texted me the next day and said, hey, I loved it. How can I help out? And I said, well, you remember you mentioned a couple of people. How about you talk to them, see if they're on board, and you can come and be a guest host. So I think that's going to be another neat, interesting aspect, from hearing another thing from her side of the world as well too.
No,
right?
I definitely think so. That is definitely going to be a cool thing. So yeah, and I'm glad it sounds like that was breaking news right here, right?
It is.
Look
this
at
is
that.
the first time I've publicly announced it. So
you see, we have this ability to just pull information out of people, and that one was mostly unprompted. But yeah, I'm going to take credit for pulling it out of you. All right, Wes?
I'm super excited to have Trisha on board.
I'm like the Barbara Walters of Jeep podcasts.
I had a smart-ass comment, but I'll leave it alone.
All right, so you're deep into the podcast. You bring a lot of guests on, and I had a question about what comes next, but you already proactively answered it with bringing another co-host on. Let's tell people where to find you. Your website is 4x4canadapodcast.com.
Yep.
But you're a podcast, so you can be found everywhere podcasts are found. Like you've published to Spotify, you've published to obviously Apple, the Apple catalog, which gets you on almost all the other apps anyway. Yep. So you're published everywhere. And iHeartRadio, I think they have their own catalog. Amazon has their own catalog now.
Anywhere there's a podcast,
all right,
we're there.
All right, good. So they can find you whatever player you use for podcasts. You can find the 4x4 Canada podcast. Instagram, Facebook. I got to imagine you have presence there.
Yep, you betcha. 4x4 Canada podcast on the gram and on Facebook. And I kind of do things a little different between those two. It's not always posting the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So my Facebook, a lot of times I'll share videos of Canadian four-wheelers or racing, happening in Canada. And so quite often you'll find a video, a YouTube link to whether it be a previous guest or whether it be, some racing that happened last weekend or something like that. And whereas the Instagram, I still do promote events there, but I also do other promotions and pretty pictures and stuff like that. So it is, slightly different thought process behind it, but they're both very same but different.
No, that's interesting because I am not into social media very much in terms of using them to their full potential. So most of the time, I publish stuff to Instagram and it has the ability to just automatically send stuff to Facebook.
Yep.
There's some stuff that does, go to Facebook only just because it's, I don't know why. Maybe because I'm sharing it on Facebook and you can't. It's so
Probably.
dumb. Like why does Instagram let you share to Facebook, but you can't share from Facebook to Instagram? Like that.
I don't know. I've tried connecting my two, and they will not connect for some whatever reason. So I do actually have to manually do it.
Oh, you have to do
differently.
it both. Oh man.
Yeah, but again, a lot of it is different info, right? So, but the one of the main focuses of my social media is to promote other, like I say, other YouTube channels or upcoming events. Quite often you'll see a poster of an upcoming event happening in that. So by all means, if somebody out there is listening and they do have an event coming up in Canada, let me know and I'll throw it on the socials and see what we can do to help promote, those events in Canada.
Yeah. Well, Wes, what you want to give maybe a few, you want to give us like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a heads up. What are your next 3 interviews that people should look for and go and find you for?
Next 3, there's a bunch of stuff on to go. One of the things I do is I do a lot of research beforehand on my podcast. So I've always got like 4 or 5, 6 on the go kind of idea. There's one coming up soon with a gentleman by the name of Rory Brown, and he was a 4-wheeler. He started back in 1972 on Vancouver Island, and he was he did a little bit of racing, but he did a lot of 4-wheeling. He was involved with the 4-wheel drive association of BC up until the 90s and that. So, where Rory and I are just trying to work out a time, that idea, right? Where it works for both of our schedules. And
how about a past episode that you think was a good representation of like just so that our audience can come and say, hey, like I'm gonna go look for that episode. That sounds cool.
We've had some awesome episodes. I mean, we had obviously you've heard of the Rebel Rally.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we had some ladies from West Kelowna go down to that, a team called Positivity Team. And about a week and a half, 2 weeks after they got back from that last October, they came on the podcast and they were just so excited. They were my first female guests. And I've had a lot of people inquiring about female guests. And that's one of the reasons for bringing Trisha on as a guest co-host. And we've had some really good interviews with some other females as well, but these ladies were still vibrating from the excitement of the Rebel Rally.
Wow.
And they were just giggling. They were just having so much fun. And I found it to be quite an inspiring one, because they're talking about, one of them had not really done any 4-wheeling and hadn't really done much, but she learned so much and she felt so powerful after that. Everybody that's listened to it has said that was just such an inspiring podcast. And that's definitely one of my favorite ones. I mean, I can't say I've got favorite because there's so many, and there's so many different.
They're all your
genres.
children. You can't say which is your favorite.
Exactly, right. But there's we've talked with different like the Overland North guys out of Ontario. That was a really great one. They put on a series of Overland Expo style events in Ontario.
Yeah.
Teddy from Unwinding Roads was absolutely one of the best ones. He has a YouTube channel. He's got a Gladiator, and we actually got down and dirty and talked about some things a man don't normally talk about, like feelings.
Wow.
And it was, there's an episode where he had a bit of a panic attack on a trail, a very famous trail, and he's with another very famous YouTuber, and he got a lot of heat over it. And he's like, okay, let's talk about it. This is what happened. This is how I felt. And it was a scary situation for him, and he just got into his panic attack. And then we also talked, he actually announced that he just bought a new Gladiator on the show. So it was a very, very good show. So it, there's just so many good ones.
No, I love that. I mean, and I don't understand, like, you said, this guy, took some flack over having a panic attack. I don't understand why people do that. You can never know what's going on with that person. I have a couple of stories that on that, if you don't mind. One was just this last summer. We were in, we went up to Pikes Peak. And so, you get on a bus, you're on this tight road, you got to get all the way up to this the very top of the peak to, have all over the land. And this guy got on the bus, and I guess he had a really hard time on the way up, right? And he basically was at the top, and we were getting on the bus, and she was trying to ask the bus driver, how can he get down except by not taking the bus, right? Like, how can he get somebody to come and give him a ride because he just can't do the bus? And he made it clear, maybe without saying like he had a panic attack, he made it clear that he had, a strong reaction to on the way up, and he couldn't do it. Well, the bus driver started making fun of him, and I just couldn't believe it, right? And she tried to talk to him about like, oh, well, here's your option, but like she wasn't really listening to him about like what his concern was, because she was like, "Whoa, you want to get down? Well, just get on the bus. We'll take you down." And she wasn't hearing that he couldn't take the bus, right? It wasn't I don't want to take the bus, right? And she wasn't here. So then the door closed, he walks away, and then she starts making fun of him, to the other people on the bus, right? Like, I don't know, I don't understand why he's so afraid to go down. Like, it's not a problem at all. And I finally stood up and yelled at her, like, "Hey, that's enough. Like, you don't know what he's been through. You don't know why he's having this reaction. I can guarantee you one thing: there is a reason, right? This is not what a person does. Have that kind of reaction for no reason, right?
Yeah.
Now, I would put my money that he was a vet and he had some experience as a veteran or while in service. So now you're making fun of this guy, because of an experience that he had for doing for our country what you won't do. Right. Like, so I got really mad at her, and the whole bus just got quiet. Right. I mean, like, everybody was just dead quiet because, I let her have it. And I wasn't going to stand for, her making fun of this guy when we have no idea what
that's the thing too. I mean, especially on a video, like you're not there in that situation. People like, even with Teddy, and I don't think he'll mind me telling this, but they were basically on a cliff edge.
Yeah.
At the bottom is a car.
Yeah.
Right beside him is a cross.
Oh.
He's going along. His winch is hooked up to a tree that breaks in the first pull.
Oh my gosh.
On the second pull, something happened with the synthetic rope, whatever, and the junction came apart.
Oh.
So and then also the left rear tire slid, so it's halfway off of the cliff. Well, of course, the dude's going to have a bit of a panic attack, right?
Yeah.
But people didn't. I'd never do that kind of idea, right? And just totally beat him down on the comments. And so this was a really good way for him to, open up and say, "Hey, this is what happened."
Right.
In reality, it doesn't matter what you think, but this is how I felt at that time.
Yeah.
I can't blame the guy. I mean, he's got a tire hanging off, and he's got a cross sitting there, and
right. I mean, it's an obvious place where people have,
And then the others talked him
more.
into staying in the vehicle. He wanted to get out of the vehicle, and the others talked him into staying, and they walked him through everything and that. But it all worked out wonderful, obviously, right? But you never know what another person is going through at that time.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got to give people grace, because you don't know most of the time you can't know what's going on in their lives. One more quick story, because this one we do know what happened is Gary and I did a trail in Moab, Cane Creek, and we did it with a friend of ours. It was 3 rigs and 3 drivers, and he's a former serviceman, and he had a pretty crazy experience in Afghanistan, and I won't go into all the details, but it was on a cliff edge. And so he realized that he was having anxiety about cliff edges and stuff like that. And he actually got the Jeep because he was hoping he could use that to try to help rehabilitate, right? And put himself in, stressful situations and try to work through them. Well, here we are, we're at the very end of the trail, which is this big, long horseshoe of a trail that goes around, a cliff edge, right? It's probably, I don't know, half a mile. It could be a whole mile. I don't know. It's a long way.
Yeah.
And he gets out of his Jeep. He's like, "I can't drive my Jeep on this. I have to walk it." And we're like, "Well, there's 3 Jeeps and 3 drivers. Like, how are we going to get 2 drivers and 3 Jeeps?" Well, we figured it out. I mean, Gary and I was in front and he was in back, and I would drive forward a few hundred yards and get out, and he would drive the the other guy's Jeep halfway. I would walk back and get it and drive it all the way up to my Jeep.
Right.
He would then, drive all the way up to his Jeep. I would then drive further ahead and Gary would drive it again halfway. I would walk back. And so we literally 2 drivers, 3 Jeeps shuttled all 3 rigs all the way to the end of the trail, for him. And not once did we, question, like, oh my God, like get over it, get in your rig and drive it. Or, it's like, look, we knew the story. We knew what he had gone through and he was in a situation where he couldn't do anymore. So we helped. And I think most of us are like that. And I think most people would do that. And I think people who make comments like that, it's just one of these dumb things where, oh, I'm anonymous on the internet, so I can say whatever I want. Right. like if you wouldn't say it to their face, don't say it to them, online. I think that's what we're missing a lot of, right now, is.
Yeah. I think social media has definitely, made that situation worse.
Right.
For sure. Right. But,
Yep.
but social media also has its good things too. Right. So.
Yeah, I don't know about that. All right, Wes. Well, hey, any other last things that we didn't cover? Anything that you want a Jeep audience to know about?
I got one other thing that we didn't talk about, and I didn't mention it to you earlier.
Yeah.
I am huge into forest fire lookouts.
Oh, neat.
And so that's something that I started years ago. I started a Facebook group called BC Forest Fire Lookouts.
All right.
And so people go to, we've got a huge amount of forest fire lookouts here in BC, and some are run down. A lot of them are restored. The Four-Wheel Drive Association of BC is in charge of maintaining 3 of them. And there's a lot of ATV clubs or hiking clubs maintain them. So I started this group years ago, BC Forest Fire Lookouts, and people just post up, it's a little quieter in the wintertime, obviously, but they post up, pictures and their trips to these fire lookouts. And a lot of us will make certain trips, to say 3 fire lookouts in a week or something like that, right?
Neat,
so it's actually become a really neat, going back into that overlanding thing, right? But it's just something about getting up in the Alpine and some good wheeling to get up there. But yeah, forest fire lookouts is actually quite a popular thing in BC.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch of those, in Washington State too. So, when I was there, it was always neat. Like if there was one nearby a trail, we almost every time that we were near it, we would, go ahead and get out and go hike, up to the rest of it if the road didn't go right up to it, right? And most of them are all locked. You can't get into them and stuff. But
a lot of ours are, I'd say, quite a few of them are vehicle accessible, which is really neat.
Oh, that is
so
neat.
You can take somebody like, an older person or somebody that might have a physical disability up there.
Yeah.
A lot of them are hike in, unfortunately, but that's also half the fun of it too. A lot of them are kept open and you've got a logbook. Like I was in charge of the Cornwall lookout by Ashcroft.
Yeah.
And we go up there, we do maintenance days and painting and all that kind of stuff, but they all have a logbook in them, and you sign it and where you're from. And it was really neat to see people from, say, Quebec or that's part of Canada, by the way, and or say Washington or California or whatever, right? So it's really neat to see where people have come to check out these fire lookouts.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about these roads or trails going up to that, because that was another thing that I meant to ask you about, which was the trails in Canada. So, I've been to the Whipsaw, which I believe that's in BC.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, down south.
And I've done that actually twice. Although one of the times I had like basically a medical emergency. Like I didn't even finish the whole trail because like my back went out on me. Whoa. And that was on the first night of camping. I'm like, I am not going to make it. I'm not going to make it through camping on, a hard ground, with my back thrown out. And so, we actually, made it to a hospital, and, I won't get into it, but I mean, like we started at a Canadian hospital and basically got turned away, and then had to drive across the border to get to a hospital here. I mean, I won't say turned away.
That doesn't surprise me though.
But like it was a world of difference of a hospital, right? I mean, like, hospitals in the US, like it's all brightly lit. And I go into this hospital and it's like dull, right? I'm like, where are the lights? Why doesn't anybody turn the lights on? And, and then like they wouldn't bother confirming if my insurance would be taken there. So like, we don't know if your insurance is going to be taken here. Like,
well, that's because everything's free in Canada, right? Which there's pros and cons to that as well. And that's a whole nother, topic of discussion.
Right.
But I know I was in the hospital last weekend with my brother in the ER, and they're mentioning that, if you're out of province to, have all your insurance information and actually pretty much call your insurance people before you go in kind of idea.
Yeah.
But it's definitely different up here in regards to our first aid situation.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the whipsaw, and I'm going to get a lot of heat on this, I know, but I honestly think that the Whipsaw Trail is probably one of the most overrated trails in BC.
Is that right?
Yeah, it is a really neat trail. Don't get me wrong, it's a neat trail. It's got some good obstacles, and you do get up in the Alpine, and it is pretty in that. I find it very busy, and everybody's all whipsaw, but they don't go past that. They don't go. All these people from the Lower Mainland don't go past. Say, Hope or even in the Kamloops area. If they went to the Kootenays, their minds would just explode with how beautiful it is and how great a wheeling it is. Yeah. And the Kootenays is the Rocky Mount as the Rocky Mountains pass through, right? So it's like your Colorado kind of idea. Yeah. And so there's a real mix of, like I say, the Whipsaw is great, but I know I find it too busy, and it's I just find it a little bit overrated myself. But I think there's so many good trails here that are, another hour away from Vancouver or 2 hours away from Vancouver farther that are equally as well or better.
Yeah. I mean, I think, overrated, so let's just say a rating is always based on like, what is it that you're looking for? Right. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're thinking, hey, I want to go do some hardcore rock crawling, let's go to the Whipsaw. Yeah, that's going to be overrated, right? Because it's nowhere near good rock crawling. Right. If you're going to go like, hey, I want to go, camping and see some stuff. And you're right. It probably, I would imagine that there are much prettier areas in Canada as well. I mean, like it was pretty, but like I wouldn't put it anywhere near, like the Rubicon or many Colorado places, right? And so I gotta believe that you have prettier areas there too. And to crowds, like I think the one time that I made it all the way through, I wouldn't say that it was crowded. Now, granted, this was 6 or more years ago, maybe, but I would say that it wasn't too crowded the days that we went. And I don't know, maybe that's because we ended up midweek instead of a weekend or something. Yeah,
definitely weekends are a lot busier, and things have really changed after the pandemic as well too. A lot of people getting out and doing that, but midweek is definitely a lot better time to do it for sure. And like I say, it is a wonderful trail. It is a beautiful trail. And there is some obstacles on it, but I hear a lot of hype on it. And personally, and that's just my own personal
So
opinion,
where are your favorite stomping grounds? Where do you make recommendations for Canadians in your area to go? Or where would you recommend, people that want to make the drive up, from Lower 48 to get up there?
Myself, I would just check out that BC Forest Fire Lookout group and hop on there, because there's so many good forest fires lookouts that are on top of these mountains that are good wheeling. I mean, you got Baldy Mountain is about an hour away from me. You got Sugar Mountain over by Vernon, Mara. These are all within an hour or two of my place. Well, I guess a couple hours. And then as soon as you start heading more into the Kootenays, you get, some, say 3 hours or something from me. It's just incredible wheeling up in the Alpines.
Wow.
And it's, the best thing you could probably do is hop onto some of the local groups. And if you're looking, to find out about more areas, some people won't say stuff, and fair enough. And some people will give directions in PMs or something like that. But we're really lucky in BC. We've got the ocean, and we've got the grasslands in the interior, like where I am, which can be quite beautiful. You got the Rocky Mountains, and you go up north. I mean, I want to go up to Tuck one day, Tuck to Yuktuk, right? Wow. That's, but northern BC is great, and Alberta, same thing. They got the Rocky Mountains, and they got the grasslands, and Saskatchewan. Northern Saskatchewan is killer lakes, great fishing up there. Southern Saskatchewan is kind of flat and wheat fields, but and Ontario's got some great wheelings. They're on the Canadian Shield out there. A lot of rock crawling and just miles and miles of trails. There's quite an extensive snowmobile trail system in Ontario. So snowmobile people use them in the wintertime, and then in the summertime, the 4x4 people use those trails. And then they maintain them, both parties maintain them.
Yeah.
And same thing with Quebec. Quebec's got some great wheeling. And East Coast, I mean, it's just like your East Coast. Going out to the East Coast in the fall with the colors are turning, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, right? So, we're really lucky. I think, both us and the Americans, I think, are quite lucky with the wide variety of wheeling we have. I mean,
There's
you got
so much.
Moab, to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, to wheeling in Maine, or down in Tennessee and some of those boys, right? So we're so lucky where we live.
We're very lucky for the geographic diversity, that we have. Like it's really incredible. Yeah. So it's awesome. Well, Wes, it's been really cool. I'm glad that you reached out to us. Glad to let folks know about another 4x4 podcast out there. Check them out. It's 4x4 Canada Podcast. We'll put a link in the show notes, but you can find them everywhere podcasts are found. And also BC Forest Fire Lookouts. We'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. I hope everybody enjoyed this interview with Wes Kibble. Thanks, folks, for spreading the word. Head on over to iTunes and give us a rating. Visit us at nwgcast.com to help support the show. Of course, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, of course, at Rumble now. All of that is at NW Jeepcast.
And with that, I am Wes.
And I'm Gary. And until next time, build it, wheel it, fix it, repeat it. God bless America, and I guess Canada too. And we'll see you on the trails. Come on, man. What do you guys have up there? 30 people maybe at the most, right?
We've got the best wheeling in North America. That's all I can say.
All I do is wheel, no matter what. Got Jeeping on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I ask who goes wheeling, everybody's hand go up, go up, go up. And we go there, and they say yeah, and we go there. 'Cause all I do